Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Committee of the Whole meeting of Fernie City Council held at 6:30 p.m. on June 18th. Thank you, Councillor. So just wanted to remind folks that June 21st is National Indigenous Peoples Day. And for those who aren't aware, there is a border crossing at Yakutat or Tobacco Plains. And it is quite a profound experience to join them walking through unmolested through the border. I'd highly recommend it. And with that in mind, Kisuk Yukit, so welcome. We acknowledge that the city of Fernie is located within Kukinamakis, the unceded territory of Yakutat Nucleate. We recognize that we live and work in their vast lands. Akanahunik are from Yakutat Nucleate and are members of the Tanaha-speaking peoples of British Columbia, Idaho, and Montana. And so with that, I will call the meeting to order and ask for approval of the agenda and any late items. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor Nixon. Councillor McIsaac.
Just a point of clarification, Your Worship, from the communication. Geez, it sounds like I'm speaking through a megaphone. Am I?
How is that different than normal?
Oh.
Actually, I heard that from the gallery first.
Point. I'm going to give you one and a half points for that. Notice that we had an email from Mr. Bornowski earlier with the conversation mentioning the discussion about the annex sidewalk discussion on 7th. Are we going to have some communication from staff about that tonight or not?
We have an
specifically on the agenda.
Well, actually, I believe Councillor Audie Kelly is going to bring or ask us to suspend the rules to add a late agenda item.
I relinquish my time.
Okay. No, thank you. And that isn't in your agenda. It is here in my script. So appreciate the question. So we will, do we vote to approve the agenda?
No, please, if you could.
Yes.
No, we need to carry the first motion, please. We need to carry the motion on the floor, which is that the June 18th Committee of the Whole meeting agenda be adopted. Or carry or squash. Sorry, don't want to make your decision.
So we will carry that. Well, let's vote. All in favor? Councillor Audie Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. I would like to make a motion to suspend the rules to add a late item to the agenda. That said item being the Active Transportation Master Plan, so ATMP 2024 sidewalk project, please.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Ramirez. Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. So we'll add that at item 7.5 in this agenda. So thank you for that. That is still feels a bit clunky, but we'll sort that out. Item number 4. And the staff recommendation of the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held May 21st be adopted. Moved by Councillor Audie Kelly, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. Any discussion? All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. I'll now open the floor to public participation and invite the public in attendance or participating electronically who wish to comment on items listed on the meeting agenda in accordance with section 3.7.3 of the procedure bylaw to address council, except speakers must not address council regarding a matter for which a public hearing must be held or has been held pursuant to the Local Government Act prior to council's consideration of the matter or adoption of the bylaw. Speakers must not address council regarding a permit for which public notice must be given or has been given pursuant to the Local Government Act prior to council's consideration of the issuance of the permit. And a speaker may only address council for a maximum of 3 minutes. So I'll look to the gallery and ask folks to raise their hands if they wish to speak this evening. So we have 4 folks in the room. And Ms. Rhodes, are there folks online who've indicated? Okay. And I asked that question just if we were going to go over our 15 minutes, we'd have to have a motion to extend, but seeing as there's not, I'll invite folks. Why don't we start with Aisha or Ms. Haynes, I'm sorry. And you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. I wanted to take my 3 minutes. I actually have 2 agenda items I wanted to mention. The first being the report on the closure of the community center. I'm actually here, ironically, to say thank you. I recognize there's a lot of catastrophic things going on, and a lot of the community groups and a number of them that I'm involved with are really panicking about the loss of this facility. But I would like to say thank you to the staff that have been working so hard this week with us on finding alternate locations. They've been meeting with us nonstop. We've seen them with weddings. I know that they're dealing with people under a lot of stress. We are under a lot of stress, but I really want to make sure that staff is committed because they're really busting their asses to try to help us find solutions. And so instead of being here to complain, I would like to say thank you for that.
Thank you for that.
Accidentally, I saw a notice on the agenda for traffic and speed on 4A. As a former resident at 302 4th Avenue, which is on the corner of 4A and 3rd, I found myself calling the city a number of times about the speed of traffic on that street. I saw many dogs being hit. I saw many close calls with pedestrians, kids going down to the boat ramp. And I felt that every time that I had called about that, my concerns were dismissed. I asked for traffic studies, nothing was done. I was told they just look like they're going fast because you're standing still. Please take this seriously. It's a really dangerous road. And so I know that's on the agenda, so I thought I'd just take a moment as a former resident there to say, this is something that really does need to be looked at. They're going way too fast. Thank you.
Thank you. I will ask you to refrain from clapping. I appreciate your enthusiasm, however. Please, yeah, that works. And if you can identify yourself and your residential address.
For sure. Does everyone hear me all right?
We can.
Thanks. So I'm going to do my best to race through this in my minutes, so bear with me. My name is Heather Smith. My husband, Joseph Hawker, Hocher, and I own the property located at 692 11th Avenue. I purchased that property on my own and the adjacent lot in 1997. So I've owned that property and with my husband for over 26 years. That does not compete with the history of both Susanna and Aaron and their families with Fernie, but we have made a significant investment over those years in the town of Fernie. I just want to say that. I also want to say, firstly, I am not opposed to having a sidewalk that creates a walking path from the highway to the dike pathway system. What I am opposed to is the current plan, which places a sidewalk inside the power poles adjacent to the property line, the very edge of the property line, and creates the most damage and has the highest impact on the 3 mature and beautifully landscaped properties on that street. What I propose is that the current plan be halted temporarily, that other more reasonable and less intrusive options be considered, that the affected landowners be given the opportunity to participate in that process. I believe a compromise can be reached quickly, and I believe that could be accomplished within the scope of the current funding application and grant with BC Active Transportation or with slight modifications and their approval. And I'm perfectly willing to assist with that. I want to speak first about consultation because I've been asked about that several times, and I want to make my position clear on the consultation. The general public consultation that occurred in September, October of 2020 during COVID is not adequate consultation, especially for a property owner such as my husband and I who do not maintain their primary residence here. And there are a lot of us who do not, but we've been in this community for 26 years. I do not see postings around town, and we weren't even allowed to travel to Fernie during COVID. So there's no opportunity we would have seen any postings about that. I was not emailed. I did not receive any letter in the mail about this proceeding, nor did I receive anything since that. I have no record of any notification by mail or email prior to June 8th, a few weeks ago. And that was when I arrived here and saw a letter that had been left at the front door of our Fernie residence. On June 10th, 2 days later, I sent an email to the contact on the info sheet indicating my concerns. I received no response. That was to operations@fernie.ca. I received the same info letter addressed to whom it may concern in the mail at our Calgary address on June 13th. 4 days before your planned construction. I sent further emails to Mayor Milligan, Bruce Lennox. I called the construction company Mar West on June 16th. I did receive an email response back from the mayor. Thank you very much. I also received, ironically, a phone call back from Mar West. Nothing from the city till the following morning, when the project engineer, Joanna Line, finally contacted me by phone, and she's asked if we could have a phone call. I asked her to come down because I wanted her to see exactly, and I wanted to understand exactly what the plan was. The city has had 3.5 years since that plan was approved to contact and discuss the project with affected property owners. There's not that many of us. On our street, there's really only 3 plus the Shaw Rogers. It wouldn't have been a difficult task to tell us what the plan was, to talk about impacts. No one attempted to contact us directly. We had to come to you. We were ignored until the issue was posted on a public forum by Erin. When we finally met with your project engineer, she was unclear as to what the plan was. She initially said the sidewalk's going to be on the outside of the pole. We showed her the letter we got, which didn't jive with that. She said, oh yeah, no, it's on the inside of the pole.
I'm sorry, Ms. Smith, I'll have to stop you there. I think you're at your 3 minutes.
Okay, hang on. I hear you.
Why don't we let Erin
Yeah,
go next?
I wanted to
and-
talk about the impacts to our property. I think that's extremely relevant. And I think it's important that you hear this, but if you've been down to the site for yourselves, I think you can see those impacts. But I also just want to say briefly, we have been stewards for your property for 27 years. These people even longer. We clean up the poop, we clean out the gravel, we clean up the garbage, we maintain it so it's pleasing. It attracts tourists, it increases property values, it increases your tax base. Consultation needs to be meaningful and fulsome, and it wasn't. And I guess if I'm cut off, those are my final submissions.
Thank you,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Smith. And I did, just for the record, I did hear your concerns this afternoon as well. So thank you for attending the Council Cafe. Erin,
Thank you.
welcome.
My name is Erin Lalonde and I live at 691 10th Avenue, so right on the corner of 7th Street and 10th Avenue. First, I would like to just touch on the contact and the communication that we were given. Same, I work from home. I'm home all day, every day, and a letter was left on my doorstep. No knock on the door, no explanation as to what was happening. I think all of us were prepared that eventually a sidewalk was going to be in place. None of us are opposed to that. When we saw the plan, which was a few days prior to the work actually being constructed, we realized how close it was actually on the property line. And for me personally, my property, that means that anybody who passes by on the sidewalk will be able to touch the side of my home, look in all of my windows, and be at the base of the stairs going into my primary door. It's unsafe. It's bordering on my privacy breach of my property. It's just wrong. My building, my foundation was built in the 1940s, before there was property lines. We built a garage in 2002. The city approved the variance for our garage to be on that same property setback. We did a renovation in 2008. And again, everything was approved to maintain that way. When the project manager came out yesterday morning, the first thing she did was pull out a set of plans that were completely contradicting what we all received in the mail. I asked her specifically what plans she was reading, and she said, well, these were the original plans. And I said, well, where's these plans? She dug through her paperwork, she found it, and she said, well, there's no pole on your plan. There clearly is a pole. She had no idea as to where the sidewalk was going to go on our property or what the impact was going to be. There's going to be multiple trees having to be removed, lines being removed, asphalt driveways removed, none of which we've spoken to the contractor since, he was aware. This will go over budget as to what was originally proposed. He was very clear with us about that. He had none of that information going forward. I also reviewed the committee of the whole meeting on October 24th, 2023, where this was brought to council. And in there, the photo that the project manager referenced where the sidewalk would go is actually completely opposite of where it actually is going to go on these plans. It is not a clear representation. And she said that her exact words in the presentation were that the sidewalk will not flow in the same connectivity as the original 2 avenues that have already been completed connected to the road. There will be a slight deviation onto the boulevard for our remaining blocks. That is untrue. It is almost 5 meters into the boulevard, which now makes oncoming people using this crosswalk walking into oncoming traffic instead of crossing at the intersection where there is a stop sign and stopped traffic. They have to walk 5 meters off of the road into the boulevard along the property lines. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Lalonde. Anyone else?
Hi, you guys. My name is Kim Lancaster and I live on Richmond Avenue where you guys are planning on putting another set of sidewalks. We did not get the letter. It was thrown on my doorstep. It was not put into the door. It was my dog that alerted me that was placed there. All the other homes on the Richmond Avenue have not received this. Either they were away on mine rescue or they were not at home at the time. There was a week of heavy wind, so they have no clue where their notices went. According to your picture here, it says that you're going to remove 1 light post and go down from 31 to 51. There is, I don't know if anybody has bothered to look from the city or engineers or electrical, but there is 4 light posts that have to be removed. Move back, I don't know where you're going to put them. There's 4. I counted again tonight. There is 5 electrical boxes. My cable boxes have to be moved. There is 1 electric big substation box surrounded by cement that has to be removed because it's right in the middle of the path of where the sidewalks are going to go. There is also 1 under the ground parking or like hydro box that has to be looked at. So before you put the cement over, you have to do something with that. Also, has anybody bothered in City Hall or engineering or anybody else bothered to look at where, because we're all underground hydro wiring up there, where the gas lines are, where the water lines are, where all the electrical wires are going? If this runs over cost, who pays for it? Is it the taxpayers? Is it the homeowners? Or is it the guys that are going to be doing this poor project? Nobody seems to answer any questions. There was very little consultation. I don't even know if there was even pictures of the Richmond Avenue sidewalks. You guys were told 1 that was going to head down from 31 down. It's not. It's heading from 31 to 51, and it's going to narrow that road. If you guys plan on going from the curb out, it'll narrow that Richmond Avenue down to a goat trail. It's bad enough now. Sidewalks in Richmond are never plowed. You're going to put brand new sidewalks there? They're never plowed. You pile snow on them. People walk on the road. There is emergency vehicles that have had trouble going down there. There is some plows that have to go down that way. There's graders, you name it. All that is your city drives every day. They go by that road. There's days that they have to stop and wait for traffic or go around because they cannot get down that road. You add a sidewalk on there, you're asking for more trouble. How many trees?
I'm sorry,
are gonna
Ms. Lancaster. No. I'm sorry, but you're at your 3 minutes.
Oh, sorry. But
No,
I would
don't
just like you
apologize.
guys to please, if anybody on council or city staff can answer these questions to me, please, can you stop, maybe put this on hold until our questions are answered? Or the study visibility done to that, where we're not gonna go out of power. Did anybody bother to contact Gas and Hydro?
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the gallery who'd like to speak to this topic? Seeing none, I'll just check again. Ms. Rhodes, is there anyone online? Seeing none, thank you for your impassioned words, and we will deal with that item at 7.5 when we get to it in the agenda. So thank you. This moves us on to item number 6, a delegation, as has already been referenced, traffic and speed along 4A Avenue from Wynn Cairns.
It's me.
Welcome.
Thank you.
You have 10 minutes.
All right, I won't need 10 minutes, but I've got my notes here, so I'll just make sure that I cover everything. My name is Wynn Cairns. I live at 1724A Avenue, and it's 4A Avenue that I'm here to talk about. Got a little bit of a spoiler alert there, but that's good. I appreciate your comments for sure. So for those who don't know, and for folks at home or, for posterity, 4A Avenue is the road that goes in, it connects 4th Avenue. You can go in front of the LaRue Mansion, you can go down to the boat launch or onto 4A, parallel to the river, and then it does this sharp turn onto 1st Street, where it intersects finally with 1st Avenue, where you can come north to downtown or south back down into the airport. It is, it's not a very long stretch of road. It is a lovely stretch of road in the city. It's got a lot of users beyond just the residents who live there. The residents who live there have little families, they have big kids. We've got, seniors living independently. We've got the cross section of Fernie residents on that street, but we also get a lot of people riding their bikes down there, going for walks along the road. We've got in the fall, lots of deer that come along there. It is a very nice multi-use kind of area. Even the historical walking tours use that road as part of their tours that they do along the city. But the problem is increasingly, it seems, and it's been happening for years, but it seems like it's getting worse, is that people, it appears, like to use it as a bit of a shortcut. Instead of the so terribly onerous 4-way stop at 4th and 2nd, they decide it's easier and probably faster because they go so fast coming along 4A Avenue. And so, it's not just the residents who live there that have noticed this over the years. It's regularly identified in the different kinds of active transportation master plan and in the traffic study that was done in 2017. It's identified as an area to look at. So I wanted to, in the letter that I sent to appear as a delegation, I tried to, find as much support for the comments that I have today. One of the things that it clearly aligns with is council's objectives to have a inclusive and livable communities. It's supported by the Active Transportation Master Plan. 4A is identified as a preferred pedestrian route. In that 2017 traffic control review that was done, back to the Active Transportation Master Plan. One of the things that that really jumped out at me that I think is really important is that it was identified as a local road. It has been designed and its intended use is a local road rather than a collector route. It is not intended or designed to be used as a collector route, which, the definition of that is like the kind of faster way to get from point A to point B. So it is a residential road. That's what it's designed for. And that's not really what it's been being used for by people that are using it as a shortcut. So that 2017 traffic control review that was done for the city by McElhaney and ICBC, I highlighted a series of concerns having to do with speed. It was in 2017. They identified that was a problem. Sight lines are terrible, particularly at that intersection of 4th and 5th and 3rd and 4A. And other hazards, particularly on that sort of sharp turn where it turns into 1st. And that was back in 2017. So everybody, I think, that has lived there or uses that road probably has a story to tell about a near miss or an incident that had gone unreported. ICBC has a dashboard from 2018 to 2022. They only list 4 crashes there, but everybody that uses that regularly can at least identify a near miss or maybe even unreported incidents that have happened along that route. And by the way, I also have signatures. I got a little bit late to the party, but I got a list of signatures from people along that stretch of road in support of my comments here today. So maybe Ms. Daniels can help me later figure out how to upload that or whatever person does. In any case, the suggestions that we put forward in the letter were including things like slowing the posted speed to 30 kilometers an hour, having 3- and 4-way stops at each of those intersections,
slow signs, hazard signs along that turn, just a number, we put a number of suggestions in there. And as I've been talking to the neighbors, people have other suggestions as well. But I really think that the goal of slowing people down, I mean, it's great to have people use the road just as long as they're using it with care and they're using it mindfully of the other users there. If the goal is to slow people down, then all those suggestions would be wonderful, but I also understand, the importance of incrementalism. So if there was one thing, it would be to have the posted speed limit reduced. And I think that that's within the power of the city. So with that, I'd love to hear your thoughts, find out what next steps are, see if there are any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the presentation, Ms. Cairns. Look to council. Any questions or comments for our delegation? Councillor McIsaac and then Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Worship. Well, just in case no one else was going to make the comment, I was going to say that's the best delegation presentation to appear in our package possibly ever. Well done.
Nailed it.
I guess what the comment that I wanted to make. So I don't live down there, but I've traveled that route, and I would suspect that were somebody proposing that particular layout of roads there today, they would be laughed out of the engineering department because it is a kludgy design at best. And I can't imagine anyone that's driven there that doesn't agree with that whole thing. The one comment I want to make about the 30-kilometer-an-hour thing is I suspect people whip through there at 50 with a 40-kilometer-an-hour thing, and I doubt very much they'll slow down just because we put a smaller number up there. But I would definitely look to the rest of council and the engineering department to look at other traffic calming measures, like perhaps some stop signs. Just if it's not such a good shortcut, perhaps less people will use it. So
yeah,
Exactly my thought.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. Yeah, my question was less to Ms. Cairns and more to staff around what steps do we need to implement traffic calming measures. In particular, I kept an office just around the corner from that intersection on 3rd Ave for over a decade, and I can attest to many near misses myself on that intersection, dropping down to the boat launch and 4th Ave and 4A Ave. And putting a 4-way stop there, I think, would do quite a lot to slow some of that traffic down and just make that a much safer intersection, because there's a lot of blind entrance and exits off of that corner. So what would be required to move that?
Mr. Boranowski.
I believe I would like a resolution to refer the matter to staff to bring back a recommendation on actions and related costs for council to consider, so that we can dedicate some resources to it.
Thank you. Councillor Ramirez.
Your Worship, I just think the next steps will look very similar to what we did on Coqueto. Was that last year? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So maybe another additional question for myself would be, has there been any feedback on how that intersection is working on Coqueto?
Good question.
Your Worship and Council, anecdotal feedback that at the beginning it was a nightmare and that now people have gotten used to it. But other than that, no formal feedback. We haven't engaged in a survey of any type.
Thank you. Councillor McIsaac.
Your Worship, if a motion to ask staff to investigate this and return with some solutions and costs is appropriate, I would make that now.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Hamilton. Further discussion. Councillor Nixon.
I mean, thank you, Worship. Yeah, I look at that intersection, it just reminds me of the Mount McLean and Coqueto Road, and by putting in the 4-way stop there, it just, yeah, I think it's alleviated a lot of issues. We haven't received any feedback that it's been bad. I would even go one step further and just say we should just put stop signs in this on 4A versus make it a 4-way stop, rather than going to staff and committing, getting resources. So, but I'll vote in favor of the resolution as well.
Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. I really do appreciate, Ms. Cairns, that you brought a whole bunch of solution ideas to the table. That's awesome. Identifying a problem, but also coming forward with solutions is great. My only thing that I would like to know too from staff is to make sure that because I know on Kaketo, one of the issues is the steep hill, and also at that intersection, like you're going down and up. So to make sure what priority it has for winter road care as well. So people, if we put stop signs, aren't going to slide right through them.
They slide right through them already. Right now, there's no stop signs there, but people drive so fast is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's a fair comment. And like Councillor Claudia Kelly, I think, yeah, I very much appreciate all the solutions you've brought because, you know, I walk up there to visit my mom and I walk the dog up that hill on a very short leash because it's, you never know where you're going to meet at the top. So it's, it is a bit of a, it feels a little bit like Russian roulette sometimes. So I appreciate the perspective. Councillor Shoesmith.
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. Not to flog this horse to death here. I certainly feel that that is one of the more awkward places in town to go through an intersection. I actually have heard some amount of negative feedback and positive about our Kaketo intersection. I gather the speeding tradesman types that I'm in contact with all the time don't like it. But I would add that this is a much more out of the way, less important road to almost anybody that it doesn't live on it. So
yeah,
more than happy to support the motion.
Thank you. Well, and I think Ms. Cairns has raised a really interesting point because that is turning into a feeder road because the four-way stop, particularly when there's a train in the crossing, gets backed up beyond the post office turnoff like it is. And so people see some brake lights and they automatically turn. I think, yeah, it is sort of unintended consequences as the community evolves. Yeah, please.
Can I say one more thing?
Of course.
That we thought of, you know, you do these things or you start to think about them and then you put your thing in and go, hey, but then you start to think about the other things. If there was a dedicated turning lane, like no parking on at the four-way and then right before the train to get into the airport, if there was if there's one car that's a little bit out of line, nobody can turn to go down to the airport when there's a train there. But if there was a dedicated turn lane, there's lots of space for it because people do it when the cars are. Anyway, just another.
No, I've often thought the same thing. You're absolutely right because people are desperate to get in the line from the four-way. They don't think about their position in the road.
Yeah.
They just get in line and sometimes you can't get past them. Right? Sometimes you can't get past them on a bicycle because they're trying to turn and they can't. Yeah, no, it's a fair comment. Councillor Nixon.
Thanks again, Your Worship. This also reminds me of the booth that we were at Federation of Canadian Municipalities, the Livable Cities, the data
gathering things.
The data gathering things for air quality, speed, noise, traffic. Yeah, it's all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, I don't know if that links to it. I did send it around to the rest of council and to staff. So it'd be great to actually explore that as well.
Yeah, so, particularly given they're free for the first year. It's a great idea. Any other questions or discussion? So I'll ask all those in favor of the motion. That is unanimous. Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Cairns.
Thanks,
appreciate
guys.
your presentation. This brings us to item 7.1, Fernie Community Center closure report from our CAO, Mr. Bornowski.
There we go. Thank you, Your Worship. I just need a moment to share my screen on Zoom. There we are. Thank you, Council. I have a brief presentation and I'm here presenting this generally on behalf of a very large staff team who are working on this, or a large number of our staff who are working on the project. And so detailed questions will likely have to go through Your Worship to myself or to them. We'll do our best to answer questions as we go along. A little bit on background, as noted in the report, staff had noted significant deterioration of the community center over the past number of years. Some of that deterioration is noted as far back as our facilities master plan and leisure services master plan. This year or earlier this year, we started to receive some anecdotal comments about air quality, musty smell, some informal complaints, and those generated some concerns. And so working together, the health and safety and parks, facilities and recreation departments looked at those and determined that some assessments were required. We, or rather staff, initiated an initial study to look at the presence of mold in the building and air quality. And the results from that study came back indicating the presence of heightened levels of some molds and spores in the air of the facility. After some analysis of that, staff determined that a more comprehensive facility condition assessment be completed. That was contracted out. That came back and it did find additional concerns regarding, in addition to mold, the condition of the structure and the building envelope. In general, at a high level, although more is detailed, of course, in the report and attachments, the building was constructed without a vapor barrier. As a result, there's water penetration, and as a result of temperature and water penetration over a number of years, there is mold. The insulation, the roof, some structural elements are significantly compromised, and the costing for the remediation of the building envelope and building itself before costing mold remediation was determined as a facility condition index in the report, being reported as poor and prohibitive to repair. Being that before we cost out mold remediation, we're already beyond 50 to 60% of the anticipated replacement cost. And I do want to note again, in the report on the facility condition, that replacement cost is for a bare bones gymnasium type facility. That's not for a community center facility that might meet the actual needs of the community. It would be to build a similar type of a bare bones facility. And those are very preliminary estimates. Also, it should be noted that mold remediation can be as expensive as asbestos or other harmful material. And so those costs go up very, very quickly, depending on what's found once you start to remove building envelope and coverings.
Sorry, Mr. Boranowski, is that true for mold disposal through decommissioning? Like if we were to tear that building down, does it add cost because it's got mold, it contains mold?
My understanding is yes, but I'll ask our health and safety manager or director of facilities and recreation. Yes, so that's our understanding.
Similar again to asbestos removal. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
No, not a problem. And so an update on status. The facility is closed, was closed on the 12th. Staff are actively connecting directly with impacted individuals and organizations. I've been involved with staff on a number of those conversations and with yourself, Your Worship, and I just want to provide some recognition that Ula and Jackie in Parks, Facilities and Recreation are doing phenomenal work. And I also want to provide recognition to the community that if you have a wedding or a large facility or a large function, including a graduation booked, the closure of that facility is hugely impactful. And so in recognizing the impact on staff or their good work, I in no way want to diminish that for the community. We're also connecting with community partners, consolidating contacts, and working on expedited contacts and processes to support those relocations. So I do know, staff have been working phones around the clock to try and find the absolute best and fastest contacts for a number of organizations where that, information at organization.com email address that we're typically using and where we have a lot of time for planning isn't doing the trick. I know your self-worship and others are working directly to convene community partners and interested parties to talk about the situation, current needs and opportunities. And we also have communications dedicated to supporting the closure with some additional capacity. In terms of specific next steps, we will have to prepare a formal decommissioning plan and estimate the financial impacts of that decommissioning plan. This will tie directly to something that was new in terms of asset retirement obligations and reporting that you saw this year in our budget and financial plan and reporting to the province. We'll have to assess opportunities to repurpose or expand use at other publicly owned facilities that aren't occupied by full-time tenants. And I do want to stress that we're not exploring displacing full-time tenants, but we are exploring what use and how can we maximize the use of non-fully occupied city publicly owned facilities. We do have to consider some medium-term options to meet the community needs ongoing, and then considering a potential scope of work for a longer-term project to address community needs and to engage partners on a potential future community center. That's obviously a long-term planning project, not just in terms of planning and identifying what the community needs are, but in reviewing a number of master plans and determining where that sits alongside a number of priorities.
Sorry, Mr. Bornowski. Councilor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. From the report, it looks like about 3,000 hours were the utilization on this particular facility. Just what's the sense like? Do we have that many hours available in other facilities around the city?
I'll have to redirect that to the director.
So I'm just getting caught up to speed myself, actually coming back from some holidays. I think the quick answer is no. Max Turk School is kind of the only comparable facility that we'd be able to book indoor activities such as the ones held at the community center. However, the tenants in Max Turk typically have use of that throughout the day for their activities. So from the school hours, which are typically 8 till 3:30, those tenants have sort of exclusive use of the facility. However, just today I've been preparing some communications to those tenants to ask them to book through our recreation department so we can actually have a complete understanding of what's available throughout the day if it is unused. If that answers the question, sorry.
That's helpful, thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to add, we have a number of underbooked and underutilized city facilities. The curling club may come to mind most immediately, but investments would of course be required to make it fit for use for larger events that the community center used to facilitate. Thank you. Yeah, moving along, we also have to plan for some ongoing reporting to council, both on the finances and the community impacts that we're discovering and are coming to light through the work. So you can anticipate more as we move forward through the coming months. As we determine what our options are with other facilities, where investments may be required, what the financial implications of decommissioning are. And then finally, there is going to be some adjusting of work plans and priorities to address the situation. There are likely some projects that will take a bit of a backseat just to ensure that we're addressing the decommissioning in a timely and appropriate manner and bring the capacity on to do some of the planning and engagement work over the near term. And then longer term, we can determine whether a comprehensive engagement on a new facility or a revisitation of the leisure services master plan is something that comes higher up the priority list given the other items. Your Worship and Council, thank you for your time. Happy to try and field any questions and refer those to staff as needed.
Councilor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. Did we find a venue for the wedding? Did that happen?
If you're referring to the wedding that's happening immediately, yes. I believe we've found and are finding venues for a number of major events that have been booked there, but yes. And again, credit to Aaron and Jackie and also to the family for the way in which they approach the city and were open to working with us in a respectful way. It's very much appreciated.
Yeah, I did want to comment that I'm very grateful to the community for the reaction to this. It's terrible news. And there is a strong sentimental attachment to that building, even in the state it's in. But people have been very understanding, and we're meeting tomorrow at 4 here in this building with the user groups to talk about opportunities and sort of bring them up to speed and try and brainstorm a path forward. But I have memories in that building going all the way back to Cub Scouts and pitching our tents on the floor in there, and that was more than a couple of years ago, I can tell you. So I share that sentimental attachment. So I really appreciate how the community's responded. And I know people are upset. And I did want to comment too on the wedding that's happening this Saturday. That the family, while duly upset, have been very, very understanding. And we've worked very closely with them to make sure that their needs are met. So I'm very grateful to everybody. Councillor Ramanus.
Thanks, Your Worship. This might be a little bit of a long-winded question, CAO. Bear with me here. The report itself was pretty comprehensive, and it was a little bit of a disappointing reading in the sense that, you know, over the years, it's taken a lot of beating for various reasons, and it was in a pretty bad shape. Given that, is there any learnings for City of Fernie going forward? Like if you have a brand new facility whenever, what are the few things that you do differently compared to previous years? I understand that the asset management plan came about sometime in the middle of last decade. So this deterioration probably predates that formal asset management program, but going forward, like what would you be doing differently?
I may ask the Director of Parks, Facilities and Recreation to add comment. I would start with when we bring on a new facility, ensuring that we have a clear operating and maintenance funding plan for the lifetime of that facility in place is really important. And also ensuring that shortcuts aren't made, such as building a facility without a vapor barrier and using insulation that is going to rot if there's no vapor barrier. Like there are some fundamental issues with that facility. Further, we hit some very real challenges, and I can only speak to what we worked to address when I started in 2020. And we started to look at the state of our facilities and the way our finances were managed and the redevelopment work we had to do, having some form of building maintenance reserve and protecting that as we now have. And as obviously we still have an infrastructure deficit, but working to close those gaps wherever possible is critical. We only need to look at Calgary to see that there's infrastructure that needs maintenance, and when you need to invest in it, but you can't afford to, it eventually will fail. And you know, I think there were a lot of emotional decisions that obviously were made around planning for and attempting to secure a grant for a multipurpose community center that may have been made at the expense of really looking at and caring for the existing facility, even though at that time it didn't meet the needs of the community in terms of demand and was at the end of its life. So I think that's probably a very long-winded answer, but I appreciate the question. And would you add anything, Mr. Logan?
Yeah, that was a good answer. The only thing I would add to that, heavy emphasis on when you're entertaining a new asset, that asset's thought out right to its retirement, and that we're budgeting for all the maintenance activities up to and including the retirement of a new facility. And I would note that you also require staff capacity to do that planning. And myself, I only have experience in the last 6 years, so I can't speak to the last 20. But I'm only now finding capacity, now that I have a manager in my department, to actually do that work ahead of time. So through the asset management training, understanding, you know, maintenance obligations over time and how much that costs and when to schedule it and how to track it. Those are all types of things that I'm just working on now. So taking all those reports that have been done, 2013 facility assessments, take that information, put it in a format that could actually be used by staff, and we can follow up, create documentations, and then look back on that for lessons learned, and it can inform the budget and so on, et cetera. So staff capacity is a huge issue. If we're constantly doing more new projects or getting resources directed to one thing, those are typically the types of things that get put on the back burner until time allows. So I'm enjoying the capacity to actually look into some of those things and develop plans, which are going to be in the form of 10-year capital plans for facilities.
There's potentially a real scenario there as we drill down in granularity to that level of asset management, with operating reserve potentially attached to each asset. And to our comment or our conversation a couple of meetings ago about our out to and including our asset retirement obligation, that it may inflate our infrastructure deficit, because in some cases, we have no idea what that number might be. We're sort of giving it one of these. Councillor Ramanas.
Thanks, Your Worship. I do remember from budget discussions, the operating expense was around $100,000 in the last year or something. My question is, just at a high level, like what kind of preventative maintenance were we spending out of that $100,000 in the last couple of years?
So the repair and maintenance budgets for the facilities are typically for reoccurring maintenance that would happen to HVAC equipment, life and safety equipment, alarms, that sort of thing. Requirements for fire extinguisher testing or fire alarm tests, those types of things. There's been a fair amount of work done to replace some of the mechanical equipment in the building. HVAC units, hot water tanks, those types of things. So not very glamorous. You don't, as a user, you don't really see those improvements over time. But a lot of those components that have aged out are the same age as when the building was constructed. So a lot of those are in intervals that we do track, and we do replace them after their 20 years lifespan is up. So those are the types of things that we have been doing to the building. But the envelope was the big issue that was sort of a larger can of worms.
Yeah, almost literally. Councillor Audie Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. This might be for you, Director Logan. Are there any things that we've replaced? Like, I remember talking about HVAC and things like that. Are there any things that we can maybe salvage from the building, or will they, I don't know enough about mold to know if that renders them, lost to us forever.
Thanks for the question. Yeah, so part of the decommissioning plan that council will see at a future meeting will include our obligations to close the facility, what we need to remediate as far as mold, asbestos, but there's also the investment that I just spoke to of HVAC components. We just, upgraded the washrooms for accessibility. So we'll be making a list of all those things that would be useful to take out and save for a future building or reuse in another place. So all that equipment hopefully won't go to waste, and we'll salvage what's usable.
Mr. CFO.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to add to, Councillor Ramadas's question, it was 104,000. But a lot of that is just staff time spent there every day, cleaning and closing and opening. And then there's 16,000 for utilities, 15,000 for insurance. So I just wanted to point out that a small percentage of that is actually going towards maintenance, materials and contracts and things like that.
Thank you, Mr. Burdett. Yeah, good memory. Any other questions from council? Seeing none, thank you for that, Mr. Bornowski, unless you have anything to add. Appreciate the update. Moves us on to item 7.2, the report from Bylaw Services. Although I understand there's no presentation, but I looked at any questions from council, because I have a couple of questions. No, on the Bylaw Services quarterly report. Mr. Lennox, welcome.
Thank you.
Director Lennox. So it's not clear in the report or the monthly numbers whether the number of STRs in the community, the total, and are we up or down from previous years? Do we have a sense of that?
I think it's been generally constant.
Okay.
We're going to be bringing, Your Worship, we're going to be bringing a staff report to the next committee of the whole that we're going to be looking at SDRs, and one of the requests that we're going to be, or the recommendations that we're going to be making, is that we increase the fees, the license fees for the two types of SDRs that we have. And then we're also looking at perhaps having a cap of STRs in the various neighborhoods throughout the city. So in terms of more information with STRs, we're going to be bringing that to council, hopefully at the next committee of the whole.
Excellent, thank you. Sorry, was there other questions? Were the hands up? Okay. Okay, thank you, Councillor. There was a line in there about in support to city crews, particularly snow removal, I think, and it was something to the effect, fewer tickets, but more impounds. So was that a strategy in terms of sending a message? Tickets weren't doing the job?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, it was to working closely with the operations department and clearing vehicles so that the plows could get through. Efficiency was the number one priority.
Okay, so tickets just weren't cutting it. That's fair.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's correct.
And one last question before I hand it over to Councillor Ramadaz. In the education and enforcement table, item number 3, dangerous dogs. It references dogs of a certain breed. It doesn't identify those breeds, but I wonder, shouldn't a dangerous dog designation apply regardless of breed?
Yeah, that should be updated. We've moved away from categorizing dogs as being certain types of breeds being the problem dogs, and going towards when we amended the animal responsibility bylaw, we had that tiered system of looking at dog on dog attacks regardless of breed.
Yeah.
And dog on human. That doesn't happen, but so it's more related to not keying in on the type of or the breed of dog, but rather the dog in general and how it's behaved in the community.
Excellent, thank you. So that's just a holdover from
we got
previous
it.
reporting.
Thank you for bringing that up. We'll change that.
Thank you. Councillor Ramadaz?
Thanks, Your Worship. I had similar questions as you on STRs. Actually, 2 questions, if you won't mind asking.
Please.
Yeah. The first one was, did I read it right that about 7 STR licenses were revoked?
Yeah, I don't have the report in front of me, but I believe that's what it was. Yeah.
Just curious, like what were the grounds of that? What were the reasons? Would you know?
I'd have to key in, ask the bylaw officers themselves specifically what the issues were, but there may have been that they just weren't willing to get a license.
Right. And to Mayor Milligan's question there, like I saw 2023, there were 948 short-term rentals, 2024, 980 short-term rentals. So that's the total number of units that have short-term rentals. Like that's the number.
Sorry, what was the number you mentioned?
948 and 980.
No, those are the total business licenses. We'd have to break down the number of SDRs within that number.
Right, okay.
Yeah, I think it was about 85 SDR licenses when I asked the bylaw officer this afternoon.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Further?
No, I'm good.
Councillor Audie Kelly?
Thanks, Your Worship. Director Lennox, I just wanted to pass on to our bylaw officers. They actually have a really difficult job and encounter some anger and things like that in the community. But I wanted them to know that over the winter, I did get feedback from quite a few people that the towing was actually really appreciated because some streets are impassable for the residents and also for our workers. And I just wanted to say that I think they do an excellent job. I think that they hold to our council's strategic priority of being kind in doing their work. So I just wanted to give them a shout out because I think they get a lot of flack and not a lot of kudos.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Councillor Audie Kelly. I'll certainly pass those kind words on to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Further from council. Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. Just a last question with regards to the STR. The software that we were licensing, I think this, I don't know if Mr. Lennox will be able to answer this or not, maybe. The software that we were licensing to locate STRs, and I'm just wondering if council had a comment on the success of that platform and how valuable the investment in that has been.
Well, I can speak to that because of my conversations with bylaw. It's invaluable.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons there's a consideration of increasing the fees because it's become a pretty keen reliance on that software. And as Officer Kramer's reported to me, sometimes within 30 seconds of a listing going up, they know about it. So it's pretty useful for sure.
Yeah, and that's it's been tremendous. There is time that they spend to monitor the platform and to take the measures to enforce the folks that they identify that are through the platform that don't have a business license. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the recommendations of that report was to increase the fees and to not only, have a cost recovery for enforcement, but also there is an annual fee for that software. It's $10,000. So we want to be sure that the fees cover that at the very least.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else? Seeing nothing, thank you, Director Lennox. You performed admirably in a difficult circumstance.
Yeah,
Appreciate it. It brings us to item 7.3, a report from Manager Sellinger on snow storage future site study.
Good evening, Council. I'm here to present on our snow storage future site study. So I'll go over the deliverables of this project that ISL completed for us. Items 1 through 3 are kind of our current site studies, and 4 and 5 are about our future capacity. So 1, what are the environmental characteristics of our current sites? Then what are the regulations that are applicable to those sites? And are we in compliance with those regulations? The second report that ISL did was what is our current capacity at our current sites, and what could our snow storage expansion be once the need is identified? So ISL completed a desktop and field environmental assessment of the 4 existing sites, which were the Dogwood Park, Skate Park, Railway Avenue, and the Dog Park. These sites were, These sites were assessed based on sediment and water contamination concentration standards and the impact to our in-stream and riparian areas and wetlands, as well as the habitats that support species at risk. All of our sites are conforming to regulatory legislation. However, ISL did give us a couple of recommendations moving forward. First is migratory bird impacts. So migratory birds have a nesting window from mid-April to mid-August, and the nesting zones exist within these sites. So the recommendation is that we ensure that no tree or shrub removal takes place during this bird nesting window to reduce the risks of harming nests and potential eggs that could be present. Secondly, Dogwood Park site does provide the required 30-meter wide buffer from the Elk River. However, the recommendation was made to consider marking the buffer area ahead of winter to make sure that we maintain that 30-meter buffer. Further to that, there was a recommendation that we consider maintaining a 30-meter buffer from any downstream outlet stormwater culverts that outlet to the Elk River. So our current capacity, 2023 to 2024, we tracked approximately 600 tandem loads of snow being hauled to these storage locations, which equates to about 7,320 meters cubed. The current capacity based on ISL study was 20,400 meters cubed. Noting that in recent years, our snow volume has been less than normal, we do feel like our current capacity is adequate. And further to that, Dogwood Park is not recommended for expansion, but now I'll get into what we could expand once the need is identified. So expansion site 2, as I mentioned, expansion site 1 was not recommended for expansion because of the how close the Dogwood Park is to the Elk River. This expansion would give us 1,570 meters cubed of more of storage. This is the expansion of the dog park, which is our current contractor snow storage site. Second is our skate park. This expansion that you see on the screen would allow for an additional 5,200 meters cubed of storage. And then the last one is Railway Avenue, right outside of the operations building. This would allow for 1,800 meters cubed additional storage. However, this site is also where our impound lot is. So with those 3 expansions of current sites, we would see an additional 8,620 meters cubed of storage capacity for snow. The recommendation is when we need it to expand the storage sites to full capacity because it minimizes new disturbances to our residents and to the environment. And like I mentioned, the Railway Avenue may be considered for disposition, and it also is our city tow yard. So then we got into the future needs of the city. And like I mentioned, we do feel that our current capacity is adequate. However, looking further into the future, expansion of existing sites may be needed at some point, depending on how our policy changes and how our community changes. So these 3 existing sites were also studied. I'll get into the detail on those. So ISL is recommending a staged approach, which staff, we agree, is the best approach for such a large project. There are 3 options or adequate options for future expansion. The Fernie Outdoor Rink, we're kind of in that area, Thompson Park, and the Fernie RV Resort Ditch. The recommendation is that when this is needed, we consider the outdoor rink first, as Thompson Park and 6th Avenue locations are pretty far from the city core. However, going forward, extending to these future sites as well as expanding our current sites would add a 91% increase in our snow storage. So 18,580 meters cubed of storage. There are some other considerations when we talk about expanding or, having future sites and developing future sites. The main ones, as you saw in my report, so infrastructure is one of them. A higher volume of trucking results and is proven to contribute to deteriorating quality of asphalt roads. The maintenance on new or expanding current sites and new sites would require off-season maintenance to deal with accumulated contaminants left behind or damage to the site surface. Our service delivery as well could be impacted. Location of expansion could increase the time it takes our operators to haul snow, and it also would increase the amount of times our operators would need to fuel also the amount of fuel we would be using in a given snow season. Then that leads into the financial impact of deteriorating roads and increase in staff time and increase in fuel usage. All of those cost taxpayers money. Another point that kind of isn't as obvious as community patterns. So especially with Thompson Park and 6th Avenue and even where the outdoor rink is, expanding to those sites would increase the use of heavy equipment in those locations. And that would be a change for the regular comings and goings of those areas and how people use them within our city. It could poorly impact pedestrian and motor transportation, as well as any current recreating in those areas. And lastly, environment, of course, expansion of the current sites as well as future sites would require a further environmental assessment as the one we did on our current locations, just to identify any sensitive vegetation, soil suitability for what snow we're storing there, and any meltwater discharge locations. Lastly, just reiterating how this study aligns with our corporate strategies. Determining the existing storage capacity and future potential capacity of each site informs our decision-making. It aligns with the aim to be forward-thinking and have long-term vision for our community, as well as knowing the environmental characteristics of these existing bulk storage sites and their impacts on our natural lands ensures us, the city, is prioritizing environmental responsibility, and that integrates climate policy considerations. Further, the data from the study also allows us, the staff, to consider the impact that expanding would have on our infrastructure, maintenance, and service delivery, as well as our community patterns, as I mentioned. Lastly, making the decision to only expand when it is necessary promotes climate policy, affordability of city services, and developing capacity for quality services. As a result, that enables us to have a livable community. Conclusion, based on the calculated capacity, we don't recommend considering expansion of snow storage sites right now, noting that the last 2 seasons have been abnormally dry. Capacity will continue to be monitored and will engage the budget process at the time that need for expansion is identified.
Thank you, Ms. Sillinger.
Questions?
Questions from council. Councilor Ramirez.
I like reports that don't ask for more money, Your Worship.
Councilor Nixon.
Thank you, Worship. So it was funny because the other day, I thought I'd just add this in because Sadie Shaw's name is on at the top of the report. I'm a sub at the school, and I was walking down the hallway yesterday, and I ran into Sadie, and I told her that we would be discussing this tonight, and her eyes lit up, and she went, "Wow!" And then I said, "Yes, local government might not be fast, but we are thorough, and I thank you for this very thorough report. It's very good."
Councilor McKenzie.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess the only real question I have on here is relating to, the occasional stock prospectus that past performance is no guarantee of future results. And yes, we've had a few diminished snow years. My question is, should we get a snow year, fingers crossed for skiers in the room, of average or even above average snowfall in the near term? How well will the existing capacity absorb that increased amount? And if it were not to, how quickly could one of the proposed expansions be brought into use?
That's a great question. I don't have an answer for you, unfortunately. I'm not sure if snow volume being hauled has been tracked previous to this year. I could ask my Director Hausler about that, but likely with the report I presented last month about the new truck that we'll be using and less use of the sand, the salt sand, you know, our environmental impact would be a lot less. However, studying those sites in a pinch wouldn't really be possible.
Councillor Eddie Kelly.
Thanks, your worship. I'm super excited about the new truck and the less. Did I understand you correctly, Manager Seliger? 20,400 meters is our current capacity?
Yes.
And our last year usage was 7320. So if my math is still okay, we have approximately 13,000 meters cubed of space in our current storage.
That is correct. Yeah. I think the other thing we've seen here is, yes, that is the amount we've hauled based on the truckloads, but we did get a lot of freeze and thaw. So as the thaw happens, our capacity increases because the snow turns into water. So yeah.
So we have some cushion based on recent weather patterns. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, but I appreciate that question. I like Councillor McIsaac's question too, because as we've seen, you know, some of the ski resorts in Southern California, for example, went years with little snow and then suddenly they were inundated beyond recent memory. So it is one of those things in terms of our flexibility and our ability to accommodate that could be a challenge. I know you're alive to it, but I appreciate that you're now measuring it. I'm sorry, Councillor Hamilton, I think had a question.
I did have a question, but you and Councillor McIsaac asked the same question. Mine was just phrased a little bit differently with the, you know, is this expansion something that we can quote unquote do on the fly if we're mid-storm cycle, as you allude to? You know, some of these storm systems come through and drop 2 meters of snow overnight or over a course of 3 or 4 days. That's a lot of snow. And are we going to be able to build into these expansion zones at that time?
Currently, we wouldn't be able to. I think the first step on that process would be doing an environmental assessment of those expansion sites. If we had got the environmental assessment back and kind of got the go ahead, construction could happen. However, that would still need to happen during a summer season, not necessarily a winter season, with the trees and that kind of things that are in the way. So yes, the first step would be getting an environmental assessment done of which site we wanted to expand or would be our kind of emergency storm overflow. But having that and having a successful environmental assessment would allow for kind of for us to pivot more quickly, for sure.
Councillor Hamilton.
Follow up then, you know, if we don't have the environmental assessment done and we do, you know, this winter, say, encounter a situation where we max out capacity by the end of middle of January, what's the process or procedure then for the continuing snowfall? Because we can't just turn that off like a tap.
My initial response is hauling less snow, which is not favorable for our downtown. However, that is really what it comes down to, is hauling it less and storing it in long, tall windrows. So we don't really have an emergency response to what we would or could do. Our city yards could hold some, but you know, we operate out of there, so it's not really potential. There could be private lands we could explore, but again, there's no documented process on if that does happen at this point.
Councillor Shoesmith.
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. Really great report, pretty dry for something that's not really that dry. But my question pertains more to existing snow dump sites and salt buildup. So obviously we've, you know, studied this and determined we should be some distance away from the water courses. I mean, over time, one would assume that concentration would just go up and up and up. At what point do we anticipate retesting or doing any kind of remediation or anything like that? Or is that something we just scoop back up off the ground later? Like, is it a thing we're going to have to worry about later?
That's a great question. I think that is why the expansion of Dogwood Park was not recommended. We are still below the required levels of salt. But it all, the best answer is it depends. I don't have a better answer for you. We could continue monitoring year by year if that's the wish. I do, like I mentioned earlier, the use of using brine versus the salt sand will see a lower environmental impact, and that's been studied by other municipalities. So we do have confidence in that process and that operational change that, we won't meet those thresholds of the salt and contamination that would trigger more environmental requirements.
Thank you very much. Yeah, as long as it's something on our radar, that's all.
Thank you, Ms. Sellinger. I have a couple of questions. Dogwood Park has the highest concentrations of contaminants. Is that because of the source? Like, is it getting snow from a specific site? Because concentration is different than total contaminants.
I think it's the most commonly hauled to site by the staff. It's the closest to the downtown core.
Okay, thank you. And I was struck by in the report, and I appreciate you were only now beginning to manage this in this kind of detail, but staking the boundary of the proposed snow dump annually is a recommendation. We hadn't been doing that in the past.
No, we haven't been.
Oh, that's helpful because I'm sure the dog park, among others, would appreciate that it was staked and didn't come over the fence. So that's a great practice. Thank you for taking that on. And it does occur to me to ask Mr. Burdett, so is reclamation of snow storage sites something that will have to be considered in our asset retirement obligation?
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. I'd have to get back to you on that, but my initial feeling is that at the moment, there's no legal obligation that exists for us to remediate those. And so until that happens, we couldn't even begin to measure it, to put a number on our ARO books.
Fair enough. And it strikes me, as I ask the question, until we abandon it, it continues to be used and provided we monitor it appropriately.
Right. And I think, until we expect it not to snow anymore, we'll probably keep using those sites. So
yeah, fair.
The plan wouldn't be to abandon them.
Thank you. Other questions from council? Seeing none. Thank you, Ms. Sellinger. Appreciate it. This brings us along to item 7.4, council dashboards, a report from our CAO, Mr. Boranowski.
Is council amenable to me presenting from here? Or are you?
Certainly.
Thank you. Thank you. Council, again, I have a brief presentation on the dashboards attached to the report for you this evening. This is a preliminary update on two important dashboards for council. Regular reporting on dashboards and other items, including the quarterly financials, has been discussed a number of times here. There are two dashboards attached to this report. One is a council resolution dashboard. This is a significantly simplified report for council from our existing resolution tracker tool. And the second is the preliminary strategic plan implementation dashboard. This is the first cut at a dashboard of projects specifically tailored to advance the strategic plan or net new projects that are derived from the strategic plan. First, I'll touch on council resolutions in that dashboard. The resolution tracker was implemented during about 2019-2020. It's used as an ongoing management tool. So with this tool, we capture council resolutions, assign responsibility for follow-up, and track status. Department heads or managers who are responsible for actioning resolutions are also responsible for going back into this tracker and maintaining its status as in progress, completed, not started. It is not, and I mentioned this in the report, it's not the authoritative source for resolutions. That's your minutes and your agendas. Mm-hmm. So that's where we would go as our single authoritative source of truth. It also requires significant work. It was implemented with very slim resources in 2019-20, and so it doesn't go backwards in time very well. Further, there are many, many resolutions, especially when you start thinking about readings for bylaws for corporate administration that go into that tracker. So it is just time consuming to maintain and update. So some attention needs to go into there. It's also had some inconsistent use at times. So we have had a restructuring based on the org review. We've had capacity and responsibilities reassigned. So there are little blips. So I say this not because I believe it's inefficient or ineffective. It's actually quite accurate and a really useful tool. It just does require significant investment to remain a good tool ongoing. And we have our corporate officer here to guide that process. The reorganization does require an update to some fields. We have parks, facilities and recreation, or we have leisure services. So we have a couple different department names. And so we've consolidated those at a general level for council with this dashboard. A number of items are reviewed because I believe there were north of 2,000 some odd actions for corporate administration around bylaw readings and amendments and updates. So Ms. Daniel helped update the dashboard to fit what we thought was a more reasonable level of detail for council, just the real action items. Second, we have the strategic plan. This is organized by objective, the top level below vision, mission, values in your strategic plan. It's got existing projects that are specifically and significantly aligned with the strategic plan. And so those are existing projects that we felt, as we reviewed through the leadership team, were specifically advancing the strategic plan and weren't a kludge or weren't a stretch to try and align with the strategic plan. Generally, things underway that we felt were obviously related to strategic objectives, and then the new projects. It doesn't show major capital and operating projects underway that aren't directly and specifically related. There's a number that just aren't in the strategic plan. So that's our wastewater compliance project, water source and permit requirements, fire hall, and the relocation of an important piece of municipal infrastructure, servicing infrastructure. I'd appreciate some discussion from council on the dashboards, most specifically the strategic plan. I'm interested to know for council's needs as the governing body, is there sufficient information? Would you prefer to have budgeted amount if it is budgeted? And if so, what year it's estimated for? Brief status update per items. And then as a note, we're proposing that this comes forward with ongoing financial reporting. And we'll be layering in some performance indicators and regular reporting on outcomes, more than just the top level.
Thank you. Councilor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm really thrilled with this particular package. This is something that we've been asking for last 2 years. I'm glad that it has come to us. My suggestion is, again, we won't have the best use case, for lack of better term. My suggestion is, let's roll with it, start using it, and as we go, we can modify it. I don't know what the best solution looks like, but at least if we start with the habit of looking at what our strategic priorities are, whether they are moving in the right direction or not, and having those discussions, that's good enough. That would be my suggestion, Your Worship.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Councilor Shoesmith.
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. To Councilor Ramadas's point, I think it might be a thing, just best try it out, and come the beginning of next term, let the people in the seats see what they think and maybe adjust it then.
Yeah, we've often said around this table that perfection is the enemy of the good. So let's start with something and versus nothing. Councilor Hamilton.
Thank you. I had a question, more practical thing. In the resolutions tracker and under the statuses, obviously completed is pretty self-explanatory, but there's under review and assignment. I'm just wondering if you could elucidate what those mean.
Certainly, and Ms. Daniel, you can correct me where I'm wrong. Under review means we need to go to our authoritative source of information and move a corrected resolution potentially into that resolution tracker, or we need to look back to see if there's a counter resolution at some point. That's my understanding. No? Oh.
I'm very sorry. No, sorry to do this. So under review. So when a council resolution is sent out, it is assigned to a director. So within that department, they can further sub-assign it. And it has been a wonderful tool to empower our CAO to go in and check the status of things. So one of the drop-down options that director has is to give kind of like a progress of where they were. So that would be assigned under review. Perhaps they're going out to colleagues to get support. And then when they're completed with that, they're able to mark completed. And there is also another box, which was not included on your list, notes, where we're actually able to have back and forth dialogue on what's going on. So everybody can go in, we can see what's going on, and we can see the latest.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thank you very much, CAO, for the dashboards, and Meredith and any other staff that were involved. I heard you say that there will be financial reporting sort of in conjunction with these, because I do think it's really important for us to have a sense of, even if it was like a red light, green light caution, like, are we on track? Are we way off? You know, are we going over budget here? Like, just even something simple to know if we're financially on track.
The CFO may wish to add a comment, but my intent would be that these come at the same committee meeting as his quarterly reports. So what we're trying to do is tee up a regular quarterly reporting process where you have the financials, update on the strategic plan, and the resolution dashboard as a bit of a package.
Excellent. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. I think that actually roundabout answered my question, which was, you know, we were presented these dashboards as a PDF, but I'm curious, or I'm assuming based on Ms. Daniels' comments that it's actually probably a spreadsheet currently, and curious if we would have access to that to be able to just see, you know, so there's completed, but if I wanted to filter it to see what was still outstanding, that sort of thing.
Without permission to change anything.
That would be something I would leave as a discussion between council and the CAO, and also to support the CAO, because I feel like I made it sound like he didn't know what was going on. There are so many fields that particular field that you guys needed clarification on is not one he is often looking at. That's usually one where I come in and I follow up. So yes, I would leave the access to this particular tracker as a conversation between council and the CAO.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly.
I just wanted to mention, I was able to Control F keyword search. I couldn't filter the data, but I was able to go, I actually said sidewalks, imagine that. And I went Control F sidewalks and got that data.
Councillor Ravenous.
I don't trust myself having a right access, Your Worship. Just to read access is all I need.
Yeah.
Because if I have right access, I'll delete 1 0 across the dollar sign values there.
Yeah, fair comment. Yeah, I share, well, a couple of observations with that have already been made. Councillor Kelly made it, and you sort of laughed it off a little bit, but I think color coding it such that you can look at it at a glance, red, you know, and, you know, maybe red for something that's indefinitely delayed, for example, versus, you know, red, green, yellow. So some color schemes that we can just look at it at a glance, and if we need to, focus on those ones that stand out. And the only other comment I would make on the council objective sheet is the priority is reversed. Like priority 5 being high, I mean, that's just going to confuse us. Like if you have to go back to the sheet and oh, it's priority 1. Oh, it's on track. No, that's the lowest priority. Yeah, let's get that switched around. The rest of the world uses. That would be helpful. Thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. Yeah, the last comment that I wanted to make or ask about, it was very similar to that, is it would be great to understand, you know, what staff is working on right now, but then what, you know, once it was explained to me once, like now, next, later, to just kind of understand the order of what's coming up and how things are going to be worked on might help from a council perspective and communications perspective.
Oh, that's a very good point, actually. Yeah, yeah, and stuff that's in the distant future, yeah, just keep it off the sheet below the line, as it were, until it becomes relevant. Yeah, no, good work. Thank you. Any other questions for our CAO or Mr. Barnowski?
I was just going to touch on next steps. There's one last little bit.
Okay, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, obvious next steps, as noted, we have to continue updating the resolution tracker as capacity allows. The management team will be assigned to look at performance measures in the reporting process and tools aligned with this dashboard and the strategic plan. We have joint meetings and as a leadership and management team work together on what our like non-departmental priorities are. This is one that we're agreeing is one of those. I do want to note that priorities of projects may shift as we work through a risk assessment process, and that's a longer term process, but we now have a number of employees, 2 directors who've completed professional asset management certification training, and leveraging that training to develop a risk analysis process and a risk register for the city based on our different services and asset classes and priorities will help us do a better and more defensible job of when we look at 3 priority 1 high priority items, which one is the top of those. And so we have a lot of long-term work to do around that, but I do want to recognize our Director of Parks, Facilities and Recreation brought that to the leadership team as a proposal for our strategic focus over the coming months and years, and it's a good one. So that's something that you will see reflected, and as you direct changes in priority, change those. Other than that, I would like to say you'll need to anticipate a communications capacity report in the near future. You'll note that there are some delayed and not started projects that are noted council priorities in communications and simply do not have capacity to deliver on those within the day-to-day is the reality. So for your consideration, we'll bring you some reporting around that so you can understand the context and see if there are changes that need to be made.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you. This brings us on to item 7.5, our late item, Annex Road. I hesitate to call them improvements. Annex Road changes or active transportation work that is proposed or underway. And maybe I'll turn to Councillor Audia Kelly, as you brought the item, if you'd like to kick us off in the conversation.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. I'm no disrespect meant to anyone, but from all of the feedback and everything that we heard, going to the site, visiting, talking to people, although we may feel that our communication was robust, clearly it was not robust for the affected parties. And I am concerned about my own understanding of the plan as it was presented that we did approve, and seeing the impact that it's having, particularly on 7th, and some of the loss of trees, and then in Ridgemont, some of the utilities and things like that we have to move. I'm wondering if we should be taking a step back and doing a little bit more consultation, talking to our project engineer. 9th, from what I could see, wouldn't be as badly impacted, and maybe that's the place that the contractor could start while we're working out some kinks. I'm not being a professional, I don't know. I'm just trying to look at options.
Thank you, Councillor. And I feel, Mr. Bornowski, you're at a bit of a disadvantage here because you don't have your Director of Public Works or the project engineer at hand. But I don't know if you have any initial comments.
Thank you. I have some initial comments and I am at a disadvantage, but both are just unavailable. Yeah. And so appreciating that. I do know that specific to a pause, there are really significant mobilization and demobilization costs. So pausing all 3 of the discrete projects within this project would drive significant additional costs. Separately, however, we do know that 9th has the opportunity likely to move ahead if 7th and or Ridgemont were paused for additional conversations. We came in significantly under budget, and so I think we have some wiggle room. Staff are actively working to preserve, I believe, all but one of the trees that can be preserved, which weren't addressed in the initial design. However, and this is where I am at a disadvantage. I've looked at the reports in my windows of opportunity today, and I've looked at the tender drawings, and they're very closely aligned. It just seems like we've refined details on those. And so the plan always has been to have a road and travel lanes that meet our active transportation standards, and then a boulevard, and then a sidewalk, and never to have a sidewalk adjacent to a road travel surface. But obviously, hearing from people, the communications haven't landed. The communications followed the exact methodology that was presented on and last year. So they were mailed to the owners listed that we have based on property taxation, hand delivered. And then I know Ms. Line did meet on site with a number of concerned people for conversations. Specific to Ridgemont, Ms. Line did provide that all the shallow utilities are being investigated, and most do not have to be moved. They're capable of handling the traffic weight of a sidewalk and are able to be built around. We have some Shaw pedestals that do need to be moved, and the sidewalk is going behind the existing curb, not onto the road. She feels relatively confident in that design and in 9th, and then recognizes also that there are concerns. And so I would share that a pause and ensuring that they can move to 9th Street first perhaps might buy us a week and a little bit where we can have those conversations, but not incur an additional demobilization and then remobilization cost.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that perspective, because mob and demob is always a huge part of any contract. I look, and as I understand it, the lines I saw on the ground weren't yesterday or this morning weren't necessarily the survey marks, but I do. So reflecting on the active transportation master plan and the desire not to have the sidewalk immediately adjacent to the road as it is further up on 7th, which was my initial contention, and I've accepted that that's not a preferred design, but the way it's, well, first of all, can we even take a tree down in the breeding bird window? And what are the mechanisms whereby we do that? I don't know that. And that would be worth investigating to start. But also so reflecting on Councillor Audia Kelly's comments, no disrespect to anybody who's planned this or designed it, but I look at the landscape down there and I think there's a difference between we're going to do this because we can versus we're going to do this because we should. And by that, I mean, I recognize, and the residents recognize, they, in cases, have encroached on city property. But the outcomes that are proposed, when I see the photographs and walk by there every morning, to me, it's a bit much. When somebody steps off their front step onto a sidewalk, I don't know that we're doing a service to the homeowner or the pedestrians who are going by there. Like, I just feel like it's not a good ultimate solution. And I look at 9th Avenue and I get the active transportation master plan is developed in the wake of that, but there is a gravel verge and a sidewalk and no grass verge. Like, there is no grass boulevard between the sidewalk and the gravel. Like, there are designs immediately adjacent to this that don't match. And I get it's an evolution, and we're going to come up with, eventually we will have a harmonious street design in the city, but I do think a pause here is prudent given the impact of this stretch of street. And if there's a way we can do that and have further consultation and look at our design a bit more closely and what the outcomes would be, I'm in full support of that. Councillor McIsaac and then Councillor Ramanas.
I mean, it's really his choice. Okay, I'm gonna swing away. Not so much contrary, but I feel it's important to present the other side of the view here. And the other side of the view is not, by the way, to say we shouldn't care about the people's concerns and so on. And in fact, at the end of this little stretch I'm about to make, I'm going to make some comments about the communication stuff. The active transportation master plan has been in the works for quite a long time. Contrary to what we heard earlier, there was a lot of engagement in 2021, including ample and repeated virtual opportunities for people to attend regardless of what was going on in the rest of the world at that time. The solutions that were being proposed are to do exactly what you referred to, Your Worship, which is to bring our community harmoniously along into some sort of future way where roadways are expected, sidewalks exist for the many people in our community who are either unable or unwilling to use their car to travel around. These things are the constructs of to be respectful to all modes of transportation and enable it. Putting the sidewalk with a separation between ensures that they're much easier to be cleared and plowed and available to them in all 365 days a year. Those are the goals. Now, cookie cutter solutions rarely work for everyone, and there's almost always requirements for exceptions. But I really think they really need to be exceptions. Every time we make an exception, the next council that wants to make change is going to be faced with another exception. And the next council that wants to make a change is another, and this forever, right? We're going to keep on doing. Example, the one lady's house that's very close to the property line, and she's the one that's going to end up with the sidewalk on her doorstep. And I would note, and this is not to diminish her concern about that in any way, shape, or form, but there are many houses in our community whose front step comes down to the sidewalk. That is not an unusual situation. It is unusual there. I think I completely respect the concerns that have been brought forward at the cafe this afternoon. We had a really good conversation about it. And I think the impact is significant. I don't think that the impact that's being perceived by the residents there comes about so much from what is being planned to do, but how poorly it was communicated. I really think that that's where the rubber missed the road, so to speak. Now, I heard what Mr. Boronowski said. What I'm going to suggest is that if we have followed the standard procedure for communication, and this is where we ended up, then we need to relook at our standard process for communication. That's really where I think we fell down here. I don't think that what's being proposed is necessarily wrong. Having said that, I'm quite comfortable if we want to take a breath and have a look at it and see if there are some minor changes that can mitigate some of the concerns of the residents there. But really, I think the failure is there. And this is not necessarily a failure specifically of staff, but it might be a failure of process, and it might be one that we need to address specifically if we're going to prevent this particular situation from getting worse, or more importantly, prevent it from happening over and over again.
Absolutely fair. Councillor Amanis, did you have?
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. Actually, not very dissimilar to what Councillor McIsaac is saying. For us, we rely on the staff report, and we are not here to discuss, what kind of designs and, certain parameters and all those things. Maybe they are relevant questions, but that's not the intent behind our reading the material and making a decision. Our decision making here is around sidewalks, accessibility, active transportation. Those were the sort of parameters that we were working on. And when we are said by the staff that this is part of this plan, we seem to kind of trust the professional judgment of our staff. So for us to be going down into nitty-gritty is a little bit of a disappointing thing. And I think it is mostly because of a lack of communication is how I am seeing it too. It's not so much around the plans itself, it is why we didn't take extra care to actually go and speak with the affected residents. I think that piece was missed. Just because we had an engagement session back in 2021 doesn't mean that we would remember all of it. Like I can't remember what I did yesterday, let alone 3 years ago, right? So my recommendation to CAO and the staff is, let's not make this a checkbox exercise. It's we got to really care about our process, and really, if it means an extra level of scrutiny, extra level of engagement with the community and the neighborhood, let's make that happen. Even if it costs a little bit of money, we should be okay with that. I feel like it just felt like, checkbox exercise. I did this. Let's move on to the next. Like that's the impression I'm getting after listening to the citizens and also the presentations that the neighbors made here. Another disappointing aspect, Your Worship, is, we had a roadworks project exactly around the same time last year as well. And even that did not go as smoothly as we think it did, right? And there were lessons learned. I hope that there would have been lessons learned from that particular project, but unfortunately, it looks like it just repeated. It's just that the nature of the changes on 7th is a little different from the nature of the changes that we had in the other street, but the underlying problem was still the same. There was a plan. That plan was not communicated properly to the homeowners. I really strongly urge the staff to actually incorporate those learnings, and let's not repeat that mistake again and again. These are all learning opportunities for us in the council as well as with the staff.
Thank you. Councillor Shoesmith.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. So in our strategic priorities, we've got kindness, openness, and integrity. And I feel that if you were to ask the residents of this street right now, they would say that we've maybe ticked 1/2 of those 3. And again, that's through poor communication, but it's also, I mean, this is a thing we approved at this table. In the interest of the integrity, we should admit that we're here because there's several layers of oversight missed, including us. And on a pragmatic level, I'm a guy that I do a lot of sidewalks. I work for municipalities, not this one anymore because I'm here. But I've been in the shoes here, and looking at this, we're hitting all kinds of stuff with this proposed sidewalk that's, I'm pretty certain, isn't in anybody's bid or budget. And I can see that it would quite easily fit some short distance away, probably. That's not for me to say, that's for our professionals, but I think it's worth looking into. And again, on a pragmatic note, we do have a contractor that has started, that is mobilized, that we're paying for. And we've put them in an awful spot as well. And I thank everybody that was nice to them, because I've definitely seen people not be nice to contractors in the past. But to the extent that they can change the workflow a bit and continue, I think we should get some boots on the ground and do that engagement and get that communication that we haven't. And moving forward, operate in a manner that we can be happy and proud of. Yeah, so that's all I really have on that one, other than to say that I'm working down the street and my customer was informed that they're moving and working down there now. So I think they've already changed their work plan.
Thank you. Councillor Nixon and Councillor O'D.
Thank you, Worship. I want to thank all the people that came out to the Council Cafe today. That was really great that you came in and expressed your opinions. It was very enlightening. I had just one question. If we are to change this, do we still get the grant money? That would be the main concern, although I am in favor of the pause as well.
Your Worship and Council, I don't think the grant is at risk related to design adjustments to accommodate some refinement or some scope changes. Again, I'm not the project engineer, And so I need to work with them on adjusting their priorities. But appreciating that, if we are maintaining at least progress on one project, that buys us some time to have those conversations. And I guess my only other comment is Mr. Heisler presented on the active transportation process and then the communications around these. And as he had stated, and as I'm happy to have, if council wishes to direct that we invest in an additional rounds of public engagement or consultation in those projects, we're happy to adjust our project estimates and budgets and work plans accordingly. We were following the process that we had laid out and as directed, and agree that there's always opportunity for more engagement and more consultation. It comes at a cost, but there's always opportunity.
Councillor Audie Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just a couple of things. I'm going to pull a bit of a contrarian page from Councillor McIsaac. Although I think our active transportation master plan is excellent, that doesn't mean it's completely infallible and wouldn't have room for improvement. I also think that we live in a town that's aged and that there are areas in town where some of those designs may need to be adapted. And although I totally take Councillor McIsaac's point, but there are instances where variances might be required. It was also pointed out to me with the grant that there might have been some discrepancies in some of the language that maybe the person who pointed it out to me could discuss that when the time comes. And I think, and I mean no disrespect to staff, I think our staff do their very, very best with the time, the tools, and the capacity that they have. And Councillor Shoesmith made an excellent point, but I think when we fall short, we should all own it and say, you know what, we hear you. Maybe we could have done a little bit better, or as Councillor McIsaac pointed out, maybe it's the process that needs to change. So I'm really thankful to the citizens that took the, did express, and I'm sorry that it was social media that led me to talk to some of them, but I would have hoped that it would have been in a more formalized engagement rather than that. But yeah, I just wanted to make those few points, and I do really appreciate everything. And I also want to apologize that my own understanding when I voted was slightly different than what the plan actually is. I had thought that the sidewalk was going to be much closer to the gravel drainage area. So my apologies for that.
Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. I think what I want to say, and this is sort of bouncing a little bit off what Councillor Shoesmith has said, is that I too think we have excellent staff. I think they do excellent work. I think they do what we ask them to do. And so when we insist on a certain level of communication process, that's what gets delivered.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it behooves us to, at this table, to decide if what we really want is to increase at that level of engagement. And I think, I look back, having been to, and many of us here, lots of public engagement sessions. And the cold, harsh reality is we don't get 6,283 people to those sessions, right? Oftentimes it's the same people who have a general interest in the community and so on, or they've heard that it directly affects their neighborhood. But it isn't often until later that people who are in an affected residential area realize that their area was on that public engagement session and that a change is forthcoming. And if we're, whether we're sticking a page in somebody's door or however we're doing the potential communication, it appears to me that where we've missed a little bit is on the timeliness. The cost of mobilization, demobilization is high. If we were having this conversation with the residents a month ago, that wouldn't be part of the conversation anymore, right? Because it wouldn't have happened yet. So I think that's on us at this table. I think if we want to change a little bit about how that communication process goes, that recognizing the fact that not everybody is going to be at every one of our meetings and going to understand that it's the sidewalk in front of their house that we're actually talking about, then that's requires some engagement from us, some communication with staff. How will we go about improving that process and be willing to commit, prioritize that, understand that things are going to get reduced in priority if we do that, and understand that there's a cost associated with it. But I think, I think what I'm hearing around the table is we all understand that. After this session, I'm hoping we can actually do it.
Agreed. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. Just to echo what Councillor McIsaac was just saying about kind of the process and the engagement approach. One of the more engaging conversations I had earlier today at the Council Cafe was with a couple in the community who were very much of that. That's what they wanted to talk to me about was, they like to consider themselves as being engaged, reading the newspaper every week when it comes out, looking at notifications, but they were unaware that this was impacting 7th Ave now. And so their question was, how can we improve engagement? How can we improve the communication? I turned it around to them and asked, how can we do that? What can we do better? They had to go away, said they would go away and think about it. Let me know through email or whatnot. But I've heard the same conversations as everybody around the table had at the Council Cafe. I'm in favor if we can reprioritize the work plan to accommodate some additional communication engagement, look at potential, whether or not it will actually happen, but at least entertain and look at the opportunities for adjusting the design without incurring significant costs for mobilization and demobilization. Then I think that's the best way forward.
Councillor Ramirez.
I don't know what I was about to talk, Your Worship. I think we should have block parties really and bring residents here. There's one point that I wanted to make to what Councillor McIsaac was saying in terms of timing. While I agree to what Councillor Audia Kelly was saying, that we have to own this as our collective decision, 100% agree with that. However, in the last opportunity we had with the staff, we actually asked that question, like, are we ready for this execution? And the answer that I remember we got was that we are ready. So anyway, I know it's water under the bridge, but there are lessons learned on that aspect. One more thing that I really wanted to kind of challenge Councillor McIsaac was, you did mention that, there might be some exceptions and there might be even more exceptions, and, that might just, go down a rabbit hole over many years during the term. My pushback on that is, this is a living community, right? It's complex. And in fact, those exceptions are actually the feature of the community and not a bug. You know what I mean? Like it's just evolving over many years. And if there are exceptions on one street that is a little different from another street, we should be okay with that. I think there is sometimes a tendency to over-engineer stuff. Sorry.
No, thank you. No, I appreciate the conversation. I very much appreciate the entire conversation. Not least of all is this question of ownership. Like it's shared ownership. It's us collectively at the city of Fernie, the council included, in terms of where we are. And I think we can learn from this. There is, as we've often talked about, the line between governance and management, and we hesitate to get too deep in the weeds because, one, it creates way more work for staff who are already at capacity, and two, it doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily the role we're empowered with. But I do recall, and again, this is not an issue of blame. This is just in terms of the learnings. We did ask at this table for the plan, what it looked like on the ground, and twice, going back to the meetings, we asked for that twice and we've never seen it. And I do appreciate there is a fine line that where we're meddling, oh, we should move this here, move that there. But it would have, reflecting on Councillor Audia Kelly's comments, we would have felt better informed as we went forward. Collectively, I think both staff and council. So it's, to Councillor Ravenous' point about these are all opportunities to learn and let's learn from this. What do you need from us, Mrs. Barnowski? But you have a point to make. Go ahead.
No, I appreciate your comments, Your Worship. I think, very obviously, we need to be explicit in outlining the comms timing and the process so council has a very clear picture and knows when we're at a design stage, as we did the designs a year ago when we were prepping to apply for the grant and they were brought forward and we discussed, are we changing the sidewalk? Yeah. We had those discussions here. Do you have the opportunity to say, do you want to go and talk to the community, the neighbors, the residents on that street about that design and bring back that feedback and empower council with a decision on, are you delivering on the active transportation master plan as varied, or are you varying it further? I would like to say that the designs on the ground are variances of the active transportation master plan. In no way are we delivering on the ideal layout. It's obviously compromise, and those are designed based on the available width. So it's not a cookie cutter approach, but it is an attempt to deliver on the values of safe active transportation and safe street transportation. And at times, yes, compromises or sacrifices are made in terms of non-conforming houses or encroachments onto public property, as is evidenced by the dike that was built all along the Annex Park, where significant impacts were made on homes where there were just many very real encroachments and non-conforming issues all along that corridor. But to your point, Council, absolutely understanding that you need some explicit detail in the reports coming forward to understand where those comms points are. And so thank you for that. And thank you for, we agree, there's some shared ownership in terms of process and how we did it. I would like a resolution from council specifying that we, wherever possible, adjust the work plan to allow for increased communication engagement and design refinements for the 7th and Ridgemont corridors. If, Your Worship, those are the two you would like to pause, or if it is just 7th that you would like to pause, like I'd like to be specific and council can determine that.
Well, it's a difficult one because we've heard some feedback from the community but I do recall Ms. Line talking about accommodation for all the shallow services in Ridgemont. So yeah, I don't want to speak for council. It feels like that one was well in hand. If in fact, and maybe you can ask Ms. Line at some point whether she's comfortable with that. Yeah, look to council for their. That one struck me as reasonably straightforward. It's the sidewalk matches existing sidewalk at the curb and extends that sidewalk to its connection at the top of the hill, I understand. And there's no, there are a couple of things that have already been factored in, the moving of the Shaw or Telus or Rogers, whoever they are these days, infrastructure, those things.
I do believe so. If you would like, we could have a resolution to allocate current work to 9th and where possible, create time for design refinements and consultation, prioritizing 7th and considering Ridgemont. And that gives staff where possible, we're starting on 9th. We're going to focus our design work as much as possible where there's the most intense response, and provided we have capacity, continue along refined design tweaks if there are possible for Ridgemont.
Perfect.
I would ask that the corporate officer correct that for me where needed.
I would ask that we take a few moments just to confer to make sure I have all the language collected so council can review.
Okay. Conferring with us collectively or conferring with Mr. Bornowski? Sorry.
Okay. I don't have a soul, apparently. A, yeah. A short 5-minute recess would be great.
Perfect. Let's do that. Ms. Rhodes, thank you. Okay, everybody. Can we come back to the table, please? Finally get to use my gavel. I gavelled you.
Yes.
No, that's the first time. Councillor Shoesmith, thank you. Director Lennox, we'll have one meeting. Thanks so much. Sorry, that was unnecessarily cruel. I apologize. Thank you, Ms. Rosa. We're back on the air. Thank you. Corporate Officer Daniel.
The proposed resolution, and this is absolutely open to wording before anyone has to move or second it, which I've just sent through the chat in Zoom, is that committee directs staff to focus initial work for the ATMP 2024 sidewalk program to be on the 9th Street portion, and where possible, prioritize additional consultation and design refinements for the remaining 7th Street and Ridgemont Avenue portions.
I'm comfortable with that. Moved by Councillor Ramirez, seconded by Councillor Shoesmith. Any further discussion? It is, yeah. Okay. Councillor Audie Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm a little, where possible, seems a little vague for me.
I'm comfortable with that, Your Worship. It's intentional and it is good that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's directed, yeah. Further discussion? All those in favor? Oh, Mr. Bornowski, sorry. It's a unanimous vote. Did you have a comment? I don't want to stifle your comment.
Your Worship, my only comment was to cost not exceeding the approved budgeted amount or grant funding may be something of a gate for you if you're uncomfortable with where possible. A reasonable gate is always the funding envelope for the grant and municipal funding committed to the project, which is how I would interpret where possible.
Yeah, and
Because-
I'm comfortable with that interpretation as well. So why don't we leave it there?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You had a comment. I know you do because you said you wrote it down.
I did, Your Worship. I wrote it down. I just had this discussion with Ms. Smith in the audience that this amount of gray means like memory is short these days, especially for things as important as this. I want to make sure I wrote down the point. And this was the comment I want to make just before the break was with regards to something that Mr. Bornowski had said about ensuring that we're not in a cookie cutter thing, that the active transportation master plan, which I believe is an excellent plan.
Agreed.
And happy to support it and so on. And that in some cases, compromises and so on are going to have to be made. The community, unfortunately, is not built on a 2x2 grid with all streets running north-south, et cetera, et cetera. But having said that, I think it's very important that where we're going to compromise and change on that plan, that those things come with justifications that the community can understand. I'm loath to communicate to the community that being loud is a sufficient justification for change, that there should be real challenges for the resident, that there should be real costs associated with the change and so on. And that's, by the way, this is not a suggestion, by the way, that the people here are loud. I thought they were incredibly diplomatic considering how the level of concern. I just want to make sure that in our community, we understand we have a plan and we're working towards it. And where we have to compromise, we really need to understand why we're doing that and that there's costs associated with that, not just today, but I also believe to the future as well. So if we're going to, I assume we're going to hear some kind of feedback about this if we're going to make some changes down there. And I would like to hear why the whys as well as the what fors.
Understood. Yeah, no, I appreciate that perspective. I think that's completely valid. Thank you. Other comments? Seeing none? Thank you. And thank you again for your clarity of the presentations this evening. That moves us on to item 9.1, And I will ask Ms. Daniels to read the resolution to close.
That the meeting, oh, sorry.
Councilor Ramirez?
Sorry, Your Worship, I just want to confirm, did we vote? Okay.
Yep,
Sorry, short-term memory lapse here.
that's okay. It was a confusing moment.
That the meeting be closed to the public pursuant to section 91G of the community charter as the subject matter being considered relates to the litigation or potential litigation affecting the municipality.
Mover? Councilor Hamilton, seconded by Councilor Ramirez. Any discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening.